Hi guys, bienvenidos to Todo, Vida podcast. We are on episode 20. It's the first episode of 2025. So for all of you who are new here, thank you guys for tuning in. I know that with the new year, maybe you guys want something new to listen to. So you guys decided to, tune into this podcast. Maybe you guys have seen some clips, reels that have resonated with you, whether that's through TikTok or Instagram. But I just want to go ahead and introduce myself again. My name's Ashley. I am the host of Todo, Vida podcast. And literally a year ago, January either 7th or 8th, but we're pretty close to the date, I started this podcast. I just felt like I had a lot of messages to convey, and I feel like I was finally able to have different platforms to be able to use my voice, but never like this on a podcast. If you guys were able to hear any of the episodes from 2024, then we did have a lot of identifying the problem, or just identifying certain traumas, poor experiences, generational curses that I'm pretty sure we've all at one point encountered. But I definitely want to redirect this year's episodes. So for this year, I feel like we already did the whole coming to the realization of the things that we have gone through, having the platform to be able to speak about it. And then also too, for you guys listeners, being able to feel like, okay, someone finally understands the things that I've been through as well. And hopefully allowed you to not feel so alone, when it comes to these certain topics. So if you're new here, feel free to take a listen to any one of the last episodes from 2024. We talk about a lot of different things, whether that's grief, relationship, codependency, generational trauma, first generation struggles, all that great stuff. So this year, if you're looking for anything that resonates with that, feel free to take a look at the last episodes. But for this year, the redirection of this podcast is going to be a new chapter of acceptance, right? Because I feel like in order for us to be able to move forward in 2025, we finally have to come to acceptance. And of course, like I said, in 2024, we already did a lot of realization, the things that we've gone through. Now it's about turning over a new leaf and coming to this chapter of acceptance. Okay. So I feel like we're not going to be able to move forward in 2025 for those of you that have experienced any one of those poor experiences that I just stated, whether it was poor relationships, codependency, all that stuff. If you have encountered that, then now, like I said, it's about turning over a new leaf, coming to the acceptance, because we're not going to be able to move forward in 2025. And I feel like because it is a new year, although a fresh start is a mindset and it's changing your habits, because you're a reflection of your habits, not your efforts. You're a reflection of your habits. So if you're not willing to change your habits to the point where you can completely redirect them and change them, then you're just going to be a reflection of, like I said, your habits, not really your efforts. Because you can try to put an effort for one day, but if you don't change your habits, then there goes that, right? There's not going to be any progression, is what I'm trying to say. So the reason why acceptance is so important is because it allows us to let go. It allows us to let go of the thought of which I feel like we all do, right? And just because I have this podcast, I've always said I am not like some poster child for any of the things that, any of us have gone through. I'm not like this one size fits all. She has the solutions to everything. No, I'm learning this myself along the way, which I think is what makes all of my episodes very organic and just like raw. It's something that's very sincere, relatable. And I feel like that's what drew you here to begin with, right? So now we're going to go on to this new chapter of acceptance, and that's what's going to allow us to move forward. So why is acceptance so important? I feel like a lot of times what we tended to do with experiencing or encountering these poor situations, again, due to like all the previous episodes that we talked about, is because we encountered them and for some reason we couldn't really understand or accept why things didn't work out the way that we would have liked to, why we didn't get that job, why that relationship didn't work out, why we can't change our parents' behaviors, why we're not on the same page as our siblings. If you are listening to this podcast, it is probably because, one, you got some common sense, right from wrong, right? So that's one. But we also have to understand that not everyone is in the capacity to see things the way that we see them. And what we tend to do is we try to drill into their head our perspective on things. And I'm one that I'm totally willing to take accountability in any faults that I may have or errors or where I can be a student in life and continue to grow. But I feel like what we tend to do is we try to have them see our perspective, which I'm not trying to be biased and say like, oh, my perspective is right. But like, come on, guys. I think when you encounter so many like shitty situations, you get to see right from wrong because you are probably on the other end where things were done wrong to you. So that allowed you to see what's fair, what's unfair. And then that's the way that you move. That does not mean that the encounters that you have with people moving forward, that they're going to be able to deal you the card that you would have like dealt to yourself, if that makes sense. Like they're not going to be able to see things from your perspective, because when someone just does not want to progress, when someone's willing to live under a umbrella of ignorance, you're not going to be able to change that. Whether, again, that be with relationships, family members, friendships. And so what we tend to do is we try to make them understand. But I saw this quote, and I was telling my producer off camera that I saw this quote that said, if a snake bit you, would you sit there and chase the snake down and try to understand why it bit you? Or would you focus on yourself and focus on healing yourself? And once I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, we all tend to do that. Like, why can't my parents see that that's wrong? Why do they favor this sibling? Or why was I not enough for this partner? Why did I, do these things and it still wasn't enough? Guys, people are only able to comprehend to their capacity. And if they're not willing to comprehend right from wrong, then it's a dead end. You're only going to be hurting yourself by trying to drill in their head something that's morally correct. They're not capable of accepting that. So what are you going to do? You're going to sit there and you're going to damage yourself trying to get them to understand. And when really what you should be doing is starting with yourself. Now, yesterday I went ahead and I put a poll on my my podcast Instagram, and I was like, what are some of the things that you would like to hear, topics you would like to hear about going into 2025? And one that stuck out to me was mental health, right? So I feel like when we cannot come to that chapter of acceptance because we dwell on the why, what tends to happen is that you hurt yourself and you deteriorate your mental health and you deteriorate like your shine, essentially, right? So that's going to put at risk your mental health because you're not going to be able to understand why certain people did certain things. You're not going to be able to understand why people didn't appreciate you. You're not going to be able to understand it instead of just accepting it for what it is. There's always a blessing in the redirection. So you know what? If that job didn't work out, there's something better for you. If that relationship didn't work out, it's because God saw conversations. He heard conversations that you were not a part of. So he decided to remove you. I've also talked about, the power of like the prayer of removal and stuff like that. But we just focused so much last year on, I feel like, finally being able to identify the problem, identify the right from wrong. Now it's about accepting it and moving forward. And I'm not saying that because you're accepting it, you're kind of like folding to like, it is what it is. But in a sense, to your benefit, you are like, because it's going to benefit you. I'm not saying that like what so-and-so did to you. I'm not saying that the unfortunate relationships that you might have with family members, I'm not saying accept it like, and just, kind of be a doormat. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying accept it for your mental health, because again, that was one of the responses that I got was like mental health. They wanted to hear about mental health, and something that I'm very intentional with this podcast, if you guys haven't been able to tell already, but I'm also very intentional too with like everything that is involved in it. So like even down to like my producer, like I'll tell him where I want the direction of this podcast to go. Granted, nothing's like scripted with these episodes, guys. I literally always tell, and I've said this before on previous episodes, I tell God to just put the message in my heart. But when this person reached out and said, I want you to speak about mental health, I think that your mental health can be at risk of, deteriorating when you can't accept certain things, because you're sitting there like knocking your head as to why, and not focusing on the blessing of the redirection and just accepting things for what it is. Because if whatever is meant for you, nobody can take away. Not the job, not the relationship, nothing. So we also have to come to accept that maybe some people don't want to live a life of fulfillment. They don't want to think outside the box. They're willing to stay in their habits. They're willing to stay in their ignorance. They're willing to stay in their way of being because to them, growth is intimidating. Versus for people like us, if you're stagnant in life, you're like, something's wrong. At least that's how I feel. If I'm stagnant in life and I know that like I'm kind of getting comfortable, I'm like, something doesn't feel right. I gotta, and it's not about not being content with your life, but it's like growth happens when you're uncomfortable. So when you start to be comfortable, something's going wrong. You know what I'm saying? And so, back down to, me talking with my producer and stuff. Obviously he hears my intentions on this episode prior to me recording, right? Because to a certain extent, we have to be on the same page. He's a very intentional person as well, to where what he records, like he wants to believe in, So prior to starting today's episode, I did go ahead and give him kind of the rundown of exactly what I'm telling you guys right now. The direction that I want this episode, at least this year's episodes, to go into is like acceptance, accepting, like I said, the relationship that didn't work out, the job that you didn't get, or accepting yourself too. Like, I feel like sometimes we tend to feel like, why am I not good enough? Why am I not good enough? And we drill into our heads like, maybe I didn't do enough. Maybe if I would have done this instead of that, like they would have accepted me. Some people knowingly are aware that they cannot be up to your standard. So they'd rather just give you distance. And then what we sit there and do is like, well, why are they abandoning us? Well, why didn't they want to, have a relationship with me? Why didn't they pursue me? Why didn't this? And it's like, guys, what's meant for you, nobody can take away. And sometimes I feel like we break our heads way too much over the why, instead of just accepting, like, you know what? This is who I am, flawed and all. If someone's going to accept me, cool. If not, then it is what it is. Hey, I didn't get this job. God has bigger plans for me. It's all about, in order to persevere and move forward, you also have to have faith. But how do you get to this point of realization? I know you guys probably hear me and you're like, she just knows it all. No, I'll be the first to tell you, like, it took me breaking down to my core, and like I hit an all-time low, and something that nobody knows, whether my friends take a listen to this episode right now, whether family members, whether close friends, something that I did not disclose, and what I just today disclosed to my producer, because I wanted to be able to correlate the chapter of acceptance to it relating with mental health. Because in order to preserve our mental health, we need to come to accept things for what they are, right? Because if not, what's going to happen? Again, go back to your mental health. It's going to deteriorate. So that's exactly what happened to me last year. So bad to the point where, and I don't say it lightly, it was a very low place for me, but I did call the suicide hotline and I did look for answers because I just didn't know what to do anymore. I got to such a low place of over exhausting myself, trying to help my family, trying to make relationships work, like instead of just accepting things for what they are. And once I came to terms with accepting it and knowing that that was going to be what was in my best benefit, my best interest is just accepting things for what they are, it brought me so much peace. Like last episode, I talked about like the holidays and like the pressure that we put on the holidays, right? Guys, I finally accepted, like, and this is going to sound like a little, like, it's going to sound messed up, but it's not. Like, let me finish, like, I came to the acceptance of like, I don't have family for the holidays. Hey, but you know what I do have? I have friends that were willing to take me in. And if I would have just focused on the like, why don't I have family though? Why is my family not there? I wouldn't have been able to accept the cup being half full, which was like when my friends came over and we all collectively still had a good time. It was simple, it was simple. It was nothing extravagant, but it fulfilled my heart and it fed my soul, right? For New Year's, if I would have been sitting there and just been like, why am I not going out with the group of friends? And why don't I have my New Year's kiss? And if I would have just focused on that, I wouldn't have been able to accept the fact that like, hey, I'm in my house right now at peace. FYI, for New Year's, I spent it alone. And I accepted that. And I accepted that that was what was in my best interest, to be at peace with myself, because if not, what was at risk? My mental health. And you cannot operate or function or be present in other aspects of your life if your mental health isn't first. So that's why I'm trying to drill into your guys' head acceptance. I'm not saying like tough shit, it is what it is, accept it. No, I'm just telling you is like, don't sit there and beat your head over what coulda, shoulda, woulda been. If it could have, would have, or should have been, God would have made sure that that's what it was. But he saved you from that, and is going to bring you a bigger blessing. Because one thing that I do know is that he is not a God of false promises. If he promises to carry you through, if he promises to, bring you on the other end of that like slope of the hill, is because he's going to carry you through and through. He's going to carry you. So that's just why I wanted to let you guys know that it's like, it's okay to let things go, because how much harm is it doing you trying to hold on to it? It's like, again, just back to the word acceptance, accepting things for what it is, and seeing that there is always a blessing in the redirection. So like, let me see. What kind of example can I give you guys as far as like acceptance? Like, okay, well, I'll give you guys, there's different like examples I can give you guys, but okay. For example, when I was in beauty school, I talked about this in one of the episodes. I constantly got bullied. I wanted to sit there and I wanted to fight back, and I wanted to defend myself, and I wanted to say what was right and wrong. And I wanted to, and I wanted people to see like, this isn't right. But then I was like, what is that doing to me? They don't give a fuck. And what is that doing to me? Because I care. What is it doing to me? It's deteriorating my mental health. I'm not able to be present at home. In my business, I'm like constantly like feeling this feeling of like, dreading that I have to go to school. What did I do? I accepted it. I accepted it for what it was. And guess what? God carried me through. Now I have a shop. Now I have all the success that I've wanted to have, and then some, like the success of this podcast. But if I would have sat there and broke my head over trying to realize like, why can't they just see, that this is wrong what this person is doing? I probably would have got kicked out. Or I probably would have done something out of emotion, or, and I don't ever want to do that, or risk my success because I just want to force that person to see my perspective and that it's wrong. I accepted it for what it is. And I allowed God to deliver whatever hand was going to be dealt to the party that was on the side of things being unfair, right? Down to like previous relationships that I've had. I sat there and tried to be like, why was I not good enough? Why was this not enough? Like, and I was like, dude, God heard conversations you didn't. So like, I know I always resort to like relationships as an example, but I was in a relationship with somebody and they just cut me off. They cut me off. I didn't know why. Like, granted, I know that I was holding them accountable, but I feel like that's an act that you do out of love anyways. So they ended up cutting me off, totally like blocked me off everything. Just boom, sudden cutoff, right? I couldn't accept why. Few weeks went by. I was teaching a class and I had to log into my Gmail because I had to be able to read the pamphlet that I teach in classes. I had to read it off my laptop. And that morning, I was supposed to go over to the print shop to pick up a separate copy because I usually have one copy for myself and one copy for my student. So that morning, I was like, I'm exhausted. You know what? It's fine. I'm just going to read off of my laptop. I'll give them the extra copy of the pamphlet that I have and I'll accept it for what it is because I'm just too tired, right? So I come into the class, I open up my laptop, log into my Gmail, and guess whose email is right there? The person I was with. So yeah, I'm not even going to fake the funk. Of course, I went in, and when I went in, boom, OnlyFans subscriptions, subscriptions to dating apps. And I was like, oh, this is why God let that happen? He really saw things I didn't get to see. He heard conversations I didn't get to hear. So if I would have sat there and not been in my faith and not paid attention to the signs and not accepted it for what it is, I would have felt like maybe it had to do with me. That, like, their actions, I would have reflected it back onto myself. And instead I accepted it for what it was. And I was like, dang, okay. Back to like when I first started my job. Now I have my business. If those of you that know, those of you that don't know, and I'm just giving you guys, I'm trying to give you guys examples here of different scenarios and different aspects of my life where I accepted the cards that were dealt to me because I knew that God had something better for me. And I knew that in the long run, it was going to benefit me. Right. So, when I got my car, right? When I got my car and I was working at Nissan, a job that was paying me literally, on some days, I make in a day what I used to make 2 weeks at that job. Okay. So, and granted, if you know entrepreneurship life, you know, it's not always like that. But the days that are like that, it humbles me because I'm like, whoa, I was able to make in a day right now what I used to make at my old job in 2 weeks. Right. So working hard, making the minimum, I went and I got myself a new car. Girl, prior to this new, Hemi Charger that I got, I had this Corolla, a little humble Corolla. She was nice nonetheless. She got me from point A to point B. Nothing ever happened to that car. I'm telling you right now, I dodged so many accidents in that car. 7 months into having my brand new car, boom, I get hit, right? And these damages, my car, I owed $38,000. The damages were 35 and change. And I was like, are you kidding me? Just total the car. Anyways, back to the topic of acceptance, right? So I didn't know why that happened, right? So during that time, I was trying to start up my wax business. I was balancing working at this dealership. I just got this new car, whoop-de-whoop, right? And I ended up having to go on like an absence, like a disability for a little bit because, I couldn't balance everything. I was having to go to therapy appointments, this and that. Okay, guys, back to the acceptance part, right? Because I was able to go on disability, I was able to pursue waxing full time. During that period of my disability, my TikToks of my business blew up. And I never had to go back to that job because my TikToks blew up. I was now waxing full time. Okay, you would think, well, what happened with the damages on that car? Okay, years later, because, you end up doing the whole like legal process, whatever. When I was wanting to add a different service, I was wanting to add facials, and granted that didn't end up working out. But point is I wanted to start a different venture in my business and offer a different service, right? The check that I got from that accident literally funded all the supplies for the new service that I wanted to offer. But if I would have sat there and been like, oh my gosh, like I have to go on disability, I can't work my job. And instead of making the most out of the cards that were dealt to me and just accepting the fact that I knew God had better for me, like looking back now, it's like, I'm so glad I went on disability and was able to pursue my actual career full time. I'm so glad that things happened the way that it did. And ultimately I was safe in that accident. But so it's like, I know that you guys hear this and I probably always try to give you guys examples, but it's because these are testimonies of faith. And that's what you guys need to encounter as well. Like, or at least just pay attention to. If you don't encounter it, know that somebody else is speaking. And I'm not saying that these encounters that I had or experiences were coincidence, because they weren't. Like, they honestly weren't. Like, nothing is a coincidence. God is very intentional. So it's like, okay, again, if we focus on the why instead of just coming to accept, well, thankfully it was me and not anybody else, because a lot of other people fold. A lot of other people, and especially if you have faith, like you're able to see the blessing in the redirection. You're able to see the cup half full, because there's a lot of people that are willing to stay stagnant. There's a lot of people that they don't care to elevate in life. And then there's people that are drawn to a platform like this, because a lot of people have reached out to me that this podcast has resonated with them in some way. And that's always what I've asked God, is like, allow me to be the vessel that these messages that I convey or the experiences that I speak to those who need it most. Because I think that when we walk into a world and we walk amongst people that are willing to stay stagnant, that don't want to grow, that don't want to identify right from wrong, you feel crazy. You feel crazy because you're like, is it just me? No, I'm here to tell you, like, there are still good-hearted people out there. There's still people that have the blessing of common sense. I think it's more of a gift than anything else, you know? Like, there are still people out there that are able to see things from the perspective of when it's morally correct and when it's not. Now, something that I'm learning is, because I've always said, I don't want to allow this world to turn my good heart cold, because now you're like, okay, I accept it, but how do I maneuver the acceptance, right? And I'm not saying change your heart. Just change who you give your heart to, because not everybody is going to appreciate it. So it's like, create those boundaries for yourself. I'm not saying, again, change your heart. I'm just saying change who you allow in and listen to your intuition. Distinguish who deserves it and who doesn't. Because there's a lot of people out there that receive less and give more. And then there's people like us that we've always wanted to give more. We've always wanted to receive more, and we don't. And so what we think in our head is like, okay, if I give more, I'll get more. And that's unfortunately not how this world works, because while we have faith, while we have a kind heart, that's very rare in this day and age. Like that's very just rare in general. So you have to preserve that. I'm not saying change it. I'm just saying preserve it, if that makes sense. So that's going to look different for everybody. Like me right now, like I'm trying to create boundaries. And why I'm trying to create boundaries is because my mental health was literally like, granted, going back to like me, you know, calling the suicide hotline, I never feared that I was going to do anything to myself. I just felt like a prisoner trapped in my own mind, because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. And I felt the pressure of like all of the responsibilities that I have, running a business, trying to a certain extent be an example for those listening. And I'm not saying like, oh, a fake the funk type of example. Like, no, like trying to show that there is light at the end of the tunnel and you can continue to persevere. But in order to be able to tell you guys about the beauty of perseverance and the light at the end of the tunnel and the grass being greener on the other side, I also got to tell you where the grass was fucking dead. I also got to tell you where the tunnel was dark. And I never feared that I was going to do anything to myself. But I just, like, again, I said, I felt like a prisoner trapped in my own mind. So it's going to, establishing those boundaries and coming to acceptance is going to look different for everybody. I'm not the poster child for what that's going to look like for everybody. It's not a one size fits all. Personally, for me, I felt like what I did, which I think a lot of us can relate, is that we overpour into the wrong things or the wrong people. So what I had to do was I had to sit with myself, something that I didn't have the opportunity to do because I was always in survival mode. So I had to sit with myself. And again, acceptance during that time was the slowest my business has been in a while, because I feel like when I was constantly on the go of just making money, I wasn't able to just sit with myself. You know, I wasn't able to reflect and feel certain things. And when it came crashing down, it all came crashing down at the same time. So I accepted that, like, okay, God is putting me in this season for a reason. Why is it? And then I started to see things happening, you know, relationships started to fall apart. I started to identify that there was no boundaries. It was deteriorating my mental health. And so again, I feel like that's something we can all relate to, that we tend to overpour and it leaves our mental health 6 feet under, right? So for me personally, what helped was I was like, you know what? I'm going to start to say no. And that's going to weed out the people that are supposed to be in my life and the people that are just benefiting from me not having boundaries, right? Because I wanted peace, right? So I asked God for peace, and all of a sudden people start to leave because I'm setting boundaries, right? So I start to set boundaries and I start to see a shift. And while there is a shift in my life, there's also a peace that I'm bringing myself because I'm creating that change, right? So then along with creating those boundaries, it's like, okay, now it's not just about creating boundaries, because if you create boundaries with everybody minus yourself, right? And you don't start to change your habits, then nothing is going to really change. You're going to stay in the same spot, right? So I was like, okay, well, what does that mean for me? And I was like, okay, well, I'm really overwhelmed with work. I'm always working. And it's like, start to respect your days off. Start to respect your days off. We'll start there so that way you're not physically tired. And it's like, okay, well, now how do I aid to my mental health? Like the side of like my emotions and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, well, what are relationships that are hurting you? Identifying the relationships that are hurting me. And I'm like, okay, these are the relationships where I'm not falling short. The other person is falling short and it's hurting me. So you know what? I'm going to love them from a distance. So that's what I started to do. I started to love them from a distance. And then it's like, okay, now what else? Because I still have to pour into me. So while I identified, right, the things that were deteriorating my mental health and, coming to acceptance, there also has to be a change, right? So I was like, how do I pour into me? And I was like, well, show up for yourself the way that you show up for others and do the one thing that you've never done. And that is commit to your health. Eat better, go to the gym, except maybe the days that you're not fully booked that allow you to pour back into your home, and start there and see where it goes. And, I think that it's always like, we're not going to be able to have everything together, right? You're not going to be able to hit the gym 5 days a week and never slip up on your meal preps and, say no to everybody. Like, it's not going to happen from one day to another. So I also had to accept the fact that I'm learning. Even though I'm in positions of responsibility, I'm also learning myself. So like, I was doing that. I was doing that the month that I was like really slow and I came to like that low point and I was like, okay, I have the means to be able to pour into myself and stuff like that. But then in December, my business picked back up, right? I had family that came down from Oregon. I really wanted to spend time with them, but I was still trying to go to the gym and meal prep and this and that. And I was like, okay, hold on. This in a sense fills my cup too, being with certain family members for the holidays. Like, and I know earlier in the episode, I said like, I don't really have a family for the holidays. I don't have like my mom and dad together, all my siblings here. I have a brother that lives in Texas. I have one brother that does his own thing. I have a sister that has her own family, and I have a brother that passed away. So when I mean like family that came down for the holidays, it's like my small circle of cousins, which is literally 2 of them. So one of my cousins came down from Oregon, and my other cousin lives out here in the IE. And her husband, the one that lives in Oregon, her husband came down, and he's like my extended family now too, So that's what I mean is like by like my family came down and they were here for a limited amount of time. And I knew that I have so much free time to work, to go to the gym, to do this and to do that and to clean my home. But maybe that day was going to fill my cup being able to go to Korean barbecue with them or whatever. And that's what I decided to do. Because in the moment that they left, I was like, okay, there has to be a reset, a refocus, a restart of myself. And that's exactly what I did. So I took the season for what it is instead of trying to perfect everything because, okay, that's going to be what helps my mental health. And that's what's going to be, how I better myself. So I took the season for what it was. And now I'm back on track. And I was just talking about it yesterday on my story for my business page. I was like, entrepreneurship is a huge test of faith. So for example, last week, I had like 30 something clients. And this week, I think I'm barely starting to hit like 20. Like by last week, I mean 30 something. I mean like high 30s, maybe like 38 clients. And then this week, I'm barely hitting 20. And your first thought, right? Like my physical capsule, what I like to call it, right? Because there's like your spiritual and then there's your physical, right? My first thought is like, oh my gosh, that's half my income. And I was like, hold up. God's trying to do something here. I was like, what is he trying to do? And I'm like, well, I'm restarting again. Like I'm starting to go back to the gym. I took 2 weeks off. I'm starting to do my meal preps. I got to get the house together. I got to do, because that's what makes me feel better is knowing that like my laundry's done, house is clean, things are in order so that I can function properly throughout the rest of the week. Right. So it's also along with the acceptance, it's also realizing how you can pour into yourself because we did have a lot of identifying. We did a lot of identifying last year, the things that we went through, which I feel for everybody, but we all have a sad story. And this podcast is not about speaking of just poor experiences and trauma bonding all of us together as an audience, this podcast is about, yes, speaking about unfortunate events, but the key part of this entire podcast is the perseverance on how to move on to the other side of things, So now that's where we're at now, which is like the acceptance part. And acceptance only is going to benefit your mental health, because sitting there and questioning the why instead of the acceptance is going to be what deteriorates your mental health. But in order to better your mental health, you also have to pour into yourself. So there's a bunch of different factors. It's like an equation, like the identifying, the accepting, the restart, the refresh, and the refocus, how to pour into yourself, accepting the seasons of like not trying to have everything balanced or in control. It's like, as long as we're alive and as long as we have life, we're going to have problems. So how to navigate them, how to accept things for what they are, how to accept the blessing and the redirection is really a gift that you have to work for. Like, you have to be open-minded. You have to be just, like I said, like open-minded to accepting this, because if not, if you just stay focused and like terco on like the why not, why this, why that, you have to accept like what's meant for you. Nobody can take away. And also too, realizing and identifying where you have to be able to pour into yourself, because hey, maybe, for example, we all love a little retail therapy, but maybe before you would mask your emotions with retail therapy. Maybe before you would mask your emotions by like eating. Like, I know I emotionally ate a lot. And it's like, okay, I also have to accept that that's not working for me anymore, because it's only momentary satisfaction. There's no longevity in that satisfaction. It's like putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound, and the things that are going to benefit you are not going to be easy. And I think we all try to avoid that. Like, we think that we can, again, like I said, just try to put a Band-Aid over a bullet wound. It's like, you know what? Maybe in that moment, emotionally eating is what made you feel better. But 3 months down the road, when you start to see your pants fit a little tighter, like, it's not going to make you feel good, right? So it's like, the hard choice is to like get up and go to the gym. And like, and it doesn't have to be the gym, but like, you get what I'm saying, essentially. Like, the decisions for you to be able to better yourself are going to be hard choices, because deciding to put in that work that's harder than the comfortability of taking the easy way out is going to be what gives you longevity as far as like satisfaction goes, and like really filling your cup and like really being able to center your mental health and be at peace with it. So this is just the first episode. Trust me, I want to bring on more guests onto this podcast this year, because you guys have heard it from me, right? But you guys also need to hear it from different walks of life so that you don't feel so alone. Because I can sit here and tell you guys, and it's just like, okay, well, you're just getting one perspective, right? So you need to be able to get the perspectives of different people and really realize that there's a community of us out there that can relate. But guess what? We all have a sad story. We all had to persevere. And I've had like, one thing that I want to touch on is like, I've had people message me and tell me like, oh my gosh, yes, I could totally relate to that episode. I had a bunch of family members fuck me over. I would love to come on your podcast and just talk about that. And it's like, that's not what that's not what this podcast is about. Like, to a certain extent, like, I'm glad it resonated with you, but that's not what this is about. Like, I know that we can relate, but now we're shifting on to different things. Acceptance. And I'm going to bring on people that have also had poor encounters, but seeing how they shifted their perspective so that you guys can see, like, it's not just me. We've all gone through things. So I hope that this first episode is a bit of understanding as to where the direction of 2025 is going to go with this podcast, because like, if we want better, we got to chase better. We got to do better. We got to change our habits. We got to be able to accept what is for us and what's not for us for the sake of our mental health. So I hope that I was able to keep it real, raw, and just like overall organic on this episode, like I intend to do with every episode. But that's just kind of the direction that this is going. And that's just the message that I wanted to convey to you guys today, is the message of acceptance. And like I said, I'm not telling you guys tough shit. These are the cards that are dealt with you. I'm telling you, for your benefit, for the benefit of your heart, for the benefit of your mental health, accept things for what they are, what you can't change, and know that the blessing is not only in the redirection, but God is a God of fulfillment. He's intentional, and he knows where the grass is going to be greener for you without you even being able to picture it now. So if you just trust the process and you come to accept things for what it is and what it is not, like, we're going to get a lot farther. Because if not, we're going to stay stagnant. We're going to be focused on all the things that we went through, all the things that were unfair, all the relationships that didn't work out, all the people that did us wrong. And it's like, bro, they're living a very happy life while we're sitting here broken in pieces. And, you know, I don't want to be a product of my environment. I never have wanted to be. I've never wanted to play the card of a victim. And so it's like, okay, how do I change it? Because at one point I avoided it. It caught up to me bad, and it tore me down. While the people that caused me this, they're living life. They're perfectly fine. And like, stress does something physically to your body. You age, you're stressed out. The white hairs or like the gray hairs start to show up, like, you know, and it's like, I don't want that for myself. Like, especially, one thing that I want to say is, like, especially to the community of listeners that are listening right now. I'm 27. I'll be turning 28 April 15th. If y'all want to, you know, jot that down, send me a little regalito or whatever. No, I'm just kidding. But, you know, just really speak to the community of people my age. I feel like we live under this umbrella of ignorance and thinking that we're always going to be this young, and thinking that every day is promised, and it's not. We're never going to be this young again. And while these years are the years of establishing ourselves, I think they should also be the years of enjoying ourselves to a certain extent, because our youth is only once. And for my listeners that are older, I feel like you guys hear me and you're like, wow, she's full of so much wisdom. And I wish I would have known this when I was younger. And it's like, yeah, imagine if we could get these two audiences and put them together. What would the older generations tell the younger generations? Like, don't have that hatred in your heart. Come to accept things for what they are. Know that God always has a better plan for you than you can imagine. Like, they would be I feel like the older generation would be very, those that have wanted to change, you know, because I know that there is the generations of people that just stay stagnant and ignorant, but there are people that have had to break those generational curses as well, accept things for what they were, what they weren't. And if they could go back and tell their younger self something, it would be to just accept yourself for who you are and accept the days that you're currently living right now. Because while we are supposed to be establishing ourselves, it's like, this is where we're supposed to find ourselves and accept ourselves, and not like waste our youth trying to change the people that did us wrong, or trying to focus so hard on the why certain opportunities didn't happen. Because when we get older, we'll see why it didn't work out. We'll see why we didn't get that job. We'll see why that relationship didn't work out. We'll see why everything unfolded exactly the way that it needed to. So have hope. Know that it's easier said than done. And yeah, you know, I got a little raw, kind of put myself on blast today about, you know, calling the hotline, but it comes with the transparency of these episodes. And I want to thank you guys, because you guys have given me a voice. Like, you guys have allowed me to have a platform, and so many people have been able to resonate with the things that I've said. And while I appreciate that, I don't want us to just trauma bond here. Like, I also want us to be able to turn over a new leaf of acceptance, because I no longer want to be like a product of my environment, or be the experiences that I encountered. While they were very unfortunate, like me personally, I want one day for my kids to have the shock of like, what? Mom went through what? Mom, what happened to mom? I would have never guessed. Yeah, because I didn't sit there and victimize myself, because I didn't sit there and dwell on the fucked up things that happened to me. And I don't think any of us should, because all that's going to do is amargarnos la vida. And I don't want to live like that. I'm 27. I'm young. I'm established. Like, I'm still building, of course. I'm never going to get comfortable, but like, I'm blessed. My cup is very much half full. And if I just focused on the cup being half empty, we could be here all fucking day long. And I don't want that for myself, and I don't want that for you guys either. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning into Todo, Vida podcast. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys more than you guys know. And again, I'm super excited for what the next few episodes are going to bring, the direction that God ends up pushing me into. And I'm here to accept it. I'm here to ride the wave of 2025. And, this life there's no do-overs. There's no going backwards. So accept the ride for what it is. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys follow us on subscribe actually on YouTube, follow us on Spotify. If you guys haven't already, follow us on Instagram as well, Todo Vida Pod. We have a TikTok. And if you guys are in the IE and you guys want to come get a service done by me, I do have a business page, Self Care by Ash LLC. I am a Brazilian wax specialist, which it's very intimate waxing, which explains how transparent I am on this podcast. But if not, you guys can always also just again follow the podcast on Instagram, Todo Vida Pod. I always appreciate your guys' feedbacks. I appreciate the kind messages, and just thank you guys. 2025, here we are, and changes are going to be made, boundaries are going to be set, and we're going to be happier individuals because we deserve that, because we're never going to be younger than what we currently are. So with that being said, peace out. Thank you guys for listening to episode 20, and yeah, what a blessing it's going to be. Thank you guys. Peace out.